Hey everyone, this is Jeannie for Scrapbook.com, and today I'm creating 3 different slimline cards all centering around cardstock strips. For today's project, I'm using the Spring Animal Stamp Set, Tall and Skinny Alphabet Dies, Floral Confetti Stencil, Slimline Stars Die, Slim Nested Rectangles, and the Sherbet Smooth Cardstock Paper Pack. I'm using all these products here and there to create the 3 cards I'm sharing today. Before working on my cards, I pulled out one of each of the 8 colors from the paper pack. I wanted to use it to create 1/4-inch strips for each of the colors so I could use them on my cards. I took these pieces of paper to my paper trimmer, and you don't have to keep them as 1/4-inch strips. You can cut them down to whatever size you want, but I thought it was just more uniform for me. And I actually do have a 1/2-inch strip that I use in my very first card. I definitely will have leftovers and can create additional cards, but the point of the video today was to give you at least 3 ideas on how to use cardstock strips in your card. For the first card, I started off with one of the slimline panels from the Scrapbook.com card and envelope set with flat panels. The card panels are cut out of Neenah Solar cardstock and measure at 3.5 by 8.5 inches. I'm using the Candy Shop ink along with the Floral Confetti stencil and ink blending the pattern using a blending tool. As you can see, the stencil is a little shorter than a slimline panel, but that's okay because I'll be covering up the middle portion of this panel anyway with the strips so it doesn't have to line up perfectly. But I did shift it slightly just so I could ink up that bottom portion of the panel. Using the second largest die from the Slim Nested Rectangles, I die cut my panel and I matted it on darker pink cardstock from the Sherbet Paper Pack. For the strips, when I trimmed the cardstock, I had also a 1/2-inch strip. So I'm using it just to have a little bit more interest by having different sizes of the strips. And I really liked how it looks together. So I chose the 2 shades of blue for this first card and lined them up on a diagonal. I'm adhering it with Honeybee Precision Glue. And I am just carefully adhering the strips to the slimline panel. I thought that the blue really popped on the pink, and I really like this color combination just because I think it's really pretty. It just looks really fun and spring, and the blue stands out against that white card panel with that pattern. For the sentiment, I'm using the lowercase tall and skinny alphabet dies to create the word thanks. I really love alphabet dies because you can create custom sentiments to say whatever you need, especially if you can't find a sentiment for the right occasion. You can create your own, and because these are tall and skinny, you can really fit a good amount of letters in that small space. A slimline panel measures 3.5 across, and I was able to fit the word thanks. A trick that I have for delicate dies is that I take this huge roll of scrapbook double-sided adhesive and adhere a piece of Neenah Solar cardstock to it, and I will be using that to cut out my sentiments. I have a little piece left over and I don't like to waste my adhesive, so I'm just sticking it on to another piece of paper and I'll use that later down the line for like a sentiment strip. Because I adhered the Neenah Solar cardstock to the double-sided adhesive and die cut it actually keeps the letters intact, so you don't have to worry about losing your letters when you die cut, and I really love this trick. They are so delicate and they cut smoothly. I use a pair of tweezers just to pull off the letters so I can carefully place them as I see fit. Sometimes with this adhesive, once you press it down, it does stay permanently, but if you put it down lightly, you can actually remove them and adjust, especially if you don't get your sentiments lined up properly. I did go through this really carefully, starting from the middle and working my way out so the sentiment would be lined up in the middle, and I really liked how it turned out. I thought the card was a little bit plain, so I actually grabbed the pops of color in the Seafoam color, which is a liquid embellishment, and placed a dot in the middle of all the flowers that was created by the stencil. I thought that this color matched the strips in the middle so well, and I was really happy with how this card turned out, especially because of the added dimension. So I'm also popping a few dots around the sentiment just so this card is totally cohesive and there's just more dimension. This card is complete, and I will set it aside to dry because you definitely want to do that for a couple of hours just to make sure that the embellishments don't get smushed. My second card uses the darker blue and yellow cardstock that is found in the Sherbet Paper Pack. For my background, I'm using the Slimline Stars Die to cut the darker blue cardstock so that the yellow cardstock would peek through all those star openings. Once I cut it out, I use the Honey Bee precision glue to adhere it to the yellow cardstock. And I think that liquid glue is the easiest way since there are so many different openings. You can really move the glue around in all the little spaces and crevices. For the strips in this card, I decided to use the yellow and orange ones to create an alternating pattern horizontally down the slimline card. Again, I will be adhering a custom sentiment using the tall and skinny alphabet dies. So I had planned it out using enough of those strips that it would be the backdrop for those sentiments. And this is an easy way to create a card using cardstock strips. It's just a little bit different from my first card in that this is straight and the first one used the strips in a diagonal fashion. But either way, I think it's the easiest way to create a pattern and not have it to be too distracting so that when you look at this card as a finished product, your eye will still go to the sentiment and to the additional images that are found on this card. For this card, I wanted to incorporate an image, so I'm using the bear from the Spring Animal stamp set. I stamped it out using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm coloring it up really quickly using some alcohol markers. For my coloring, I am a person who uses a few markers for an image, and I usually use 3 to 4 markers. I will go in first with my darkest color and mark out all the shadows. I will go in with my mid-tone and blend out those shadows, and lastly I will go in with the lightest color and really blend out everything. For this particular image, I used a really light color as my lightest color and it didn't blend super well, so eventually I went in with a different color that really made everything blend, so I was really happy with how it turned out. Once I finished coloring him, I went ahead and fussy cut him. I wanted him to be looking towards the sentiment, and initially I was only going to create the word hello, but as you can see, there is so much space on this card since it is a slimline card that I decided to make the sentiment a little bit longer by adding the word friend. As I mentioned before, I adhered a piece of Neenah Solar cardstock to the Scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive to cut out my own sentiment, and if you don't press down, you can carefully move the letters if you line it up off center. So I did fiddle with the sentiment and had to adjust it so it looked a little bit more even with the bear there. Once I added the bear to the card, I could have stopped there, but I decided that this card needed more of a pop of color, so I stamped out additional images from the same Spring Animal stamp set. I chose the mushrooms because they will work well as a sort of small embellishment that I can place around the bear and around the sentiment just to provide another pop of color other than the blue and yellow. And since brown is kind of a neutral, I really wanted something else to kind of add to the card. So once I colored up the mushrooms, I will be adhering it to the panel in all the different areas, and I really thought that that finished off the card. And that is it for card number 2. For my last and final card, we are going with a very simple design, just using the cardstock strips and the tall and skinny alphabet dies. I used a ruler just to mark off the middle of the card so I knew where to place my strips. Above the line, I will be placing the 2 pink colors along with the yellow and the orange, and I wanted to use all the colors. Below the line, I will be using the 2 blues and the 2 green shades, and this way I will be showcasing the entire paper pack. I thought it would be really fun just to play around. I didn't really have a design in mind while I was doing this, so I definitely did this on the fly and I loved how it turned out. So for the bottom portion of the card, I just wanted to flow the colors nicely. I am using the blues and the greens and I'm placing it diagonally. There isn't really any rules to this. You can just create patterns as you see fit, and that's what I did. So each time after I finish placing the sets of colors down, I will take it to my paper trimmer and trim it down. For the top portion, which were the pinks and the yellow and the orange, I did the same thing as I did with the other regular set of colors. Then I wanted to kind of mix and match the colors. In the pink area, I also added the greens and the blues, and I just added them at a diagonal in the opposite direction, and I thought this was really fun. And this is an easy way to use up all those really small pieces of cardstock strips as you accumulate them. So I definitely saved all the little extra pieces that I am trimming off that I've collected by creating these cards. You can use them for any additional designs that you would like. I did want the colors to kind of look like they flowed, and I could have glued them on top of each other, but I decided not to. That's definitely an extra step, but I thought it was just fun. It was just something mindless that I did, and I didn't really have to think about it. Again, I pulled out the second largest die from the Slimline nested rectangles because I will be matting this on a piece of black cardstock. I just really wanted it to pop. I also will be using black cardstock for the sentiment, so I wanted it to be cohesive with the black mat on this card panel. So instead of using the lowercase alphabet dies, I'm actually using the uppercase dies. And I'm creating the word yay, which I think is just fun. You can give this to someone celebrating any occasion. There isn't an exclamation mark in this die set, but I took the lowercase I and just cut it out, and it looks like an exclamation mark. So that's what I used, and I thought it worked perfectly. So these are the 3 cards I created for today's project using those strips, and hopefully they gave you an idea or two to create your own cards using cardstock strips. Thanks for joining me here today, and I'll leave all the links to the items I used for today's 3 cards down below in the description box. Have a great day. Bye!